Hello and welcome to Focus on Israel and the Palestinian Territories. My name is Paul Calvert. Genesis 13 verse 18 in the New King James Bible says this: Then Abraham moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth tree of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. I'm here in Hebron with Gidon Ariel, an Orthodox Jew from Kiryat Arba. Now Gidon, how long has there been a Jewish community in Hebron?
Well, it depends on how you count, because Abraham lived here. So that was at least 4,000 years ago. As we saw today, visiting the Jewish Community Museum of History in Hebron, there has been a Jewish presence here 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. King David lived here and ruled here over the tribal lands of Judah before he moved up to Jerusalem and ruled over all of Israel. But the quasi-modern Jewish community of Hebron is probably close to 1,000, maybe 1,500 years old.
So the Jews have been kicked out of the land. Has there still been a remnant in the land, even though the Jews have been kicked out of the land?
Yes. The Jews were kicked out, were exiled of the land of Israel in about 70 A.D., but many Jews stayed here and have been here in the land of Israel all the time during that time. One of the four holy cities is Hebron, Safed, Jerusalem, and Tiberias. But the most holy of them, of course, are Tiberias and Safed are more relatively modern holy cities, because the Mishnah was written in Tiberias and the Zohar, the Kabbalah, was written in Tzfat. But Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived in Hebron, and David ruled over all of Israel from Jerusalem, and that's where the Holy Temple was also. So all throughout those times, there has been Jews here in Hebron.
Now, in 1929, something tragic happened to the Jewish community here. What happened?
It happened mostly here in Hebron, but it happened all over the land of Israel. The Arabs decided to have a pogrom, and they killed over 115 Jews all over the land of Israel. At that time, there were barely 130,000 Jews in Israel, in the land of Israel at all. So it was 1,000th of the entire population was killed, and hundreds of people were violently injured. In Hebron, which had a Jewish community of about 1,000 people, about 66 people were killed. So that's over 6% were murdered, and hundreds were also injured. And soon thereafter, the British, who at the time had the mandate for Palestine, they told the Jewish community of Hebron that they had to leave their hundreds, thousands of years old community and move out because of this violence.
What started the killing spree?
A rumor, probably. The Arabs were hearing that the Jews were doing something perhaps on the Temple Mount or something like that, and they just decided that this was a chance to murder Jews. That's the narrative that Jews understand.
Before this had happened, had Arabs and Jews lived together in peace in this neighborhood?
Very much so. As a matter of fact, like I said, the Jews have been living here for hundreds and hundreds of years, a minority in the city of Hebron. At the time, the Zionists were getting more and more power in the land of Israel, and they also had defensive organizations, and they encouraged the Jews of Hebron to accept a contingent of this defense organization. And the Jews of Hebron said, no. We are very, very good friends with the Arabs who live here, and we don't want to make them feel that we have to defend ourselves against them. Unfortunately, because of that, more than half of the people who were killed all over the land of Israel were killed here in Hebron.
And who were the people that were killed? Were they women and children?
Women, children, elderly, families, everybody. There were doctors here, rabbis, lawyers. It was one of the most important cities of Israel at the time.
How many children were killed?
Counting under the age of 18, I would say about 20 or 30 children.
Wow. And how many were killed?
66. Though, depending on your counts, people who died some years later, sometimes from a broken heart, are clearly because of the pogrom.
And did some of the Arab neighbors come and actually help the Jews?
Oh, yes. This is always mentioned whenever we tell the story. Unfortunately, those Arabs weren't enough and strong enough to withhold all of the Arab violent murderers who were coming around.
And how did this affect the Jewish community afterwards?
Well, the Jewish community in Hebron was decimated and was moved out. Like I said before, the British mandate required them to move out of Hebron. Some of them tried to move back this was in 1929. So between 1931 and 1936, they tried again, but again, there were Arab pogroms in 1936. So they moved out in 1936, and no Jews lived in Hebron until after 1967.
So when in 1967 was the Six-Day War, this was part of Jordan, and then once Jordan had gone, were the Jews able to then come back here to Hebron?
It wasn't simple, because even then it was political. The Arab Palestinian population of what was called the West Bank of the Jordan River, here in Israel we call it Judea and Samaria, those are the biblical names of this area, they were hundreds and thousands. And the Israelis at that time weren't so sure what to do with these lands that were liberated in the 1967 Six-Day War. But many Jews who remembered Hebron, who remembered the biblical significance of Hebron, said, we have to move back here. And so it was sometimes a little game of cat and mouse between the Israeli revenants, the settlers who wanted to come back, and the government. But it was actually mostly labor governments who said that, okay, you can move back into Hebron. And today there are over 8,000 Jews living in Kiryat Arba, which is the main Jewish neighborhood or neighborhoods of Hebron. Kiryat Arba is its own municipality, local municipality. And in Hebron itself live about 100 families, plus a large yeshiva of about 400 young men students.
So are you surrounded by Arabs all around this tiny little community?
This is radio, so I can't show you this great map that's right behind me that shows the city of Hebron, which has about 200,000 residents. Most of Hebron, Jews are not allowed to go in ever, according to the Hebron Accords of I believe it was the 90s, 92 maybe. There's a small sliver of a single road with about a dozen houses where like I said, about 100 Jewish families live. That's where Jews are allowed. The rest of Hebron is off limits to Jews.
So knowing that there'd been a massacre and then in 1967 the Jews wanting to come back into Hebron, was that really pioneering work, and would that be scary for them knowing the history in the past?
Well, to tell you the truth, in 1967 when Israel liberated Hebron, the city of Hebron was captured without a shot, because it was actually the chief rabbi of the Israel Defense Forces, Rabbi Shlomo Goren. He came driving in with his driver on a Jeep, and all throughout Hebron were white sheets and pillowcases hanging out of the windows, because everybody wanted just to surrender, because they figured if we killed and mutilated and mercilessly murdered them in 1929, they're probably coming back for revenge. And that didn't happen. And today, we're trying to live in peace with our neighbors. That's really all we want, the Israelis. We want to live in peace with our neighbors.
So 66 people were murdered. Was it just murder, or was there destruction as well?
Destruction, murder, rape, mutilation, you name it. It was a horror film. I'd seen some of the pictures here in the museum where we're doing this interview, and it was pretty horrible. But there are books that show much worse pictures, and I'm already old enough to be able to see stuff like that, and it really was very, very scary, horrific.
Now, this was under the British mandate, Palestine at the time. Did the British act justly at the time?
Did the British act justly at the time? It really depends, I'm sure, on what narrative you're listening to. Sorry to use that term more than once. From what we understand, the British turned their backs to what was going on here until finally, this is the story that we hear, one British officer thought that he was about to be attacked by Arabs. He shot a single shot, and that stopped the violence. And if he had shot that shot at the beginning and not at the end, then 66 lives would have been saved.
Was anyone ever held accountable for what happened?
That's a very good question. That is not an issue that is told the story, but I think that it would be impossible, especially after what I translated that declaration of the chancellor of the mandate. His name was Chancellor, actually. he said, we are going to bring the people who did this to justice. You're asking a great question. I'm going to look it up and see if that really happened, but nothing that we've heard of.
It must have been exciting coming back for the Jews in 1967. Of course, Hebron is very significant because where Abraham was buried.
Abraham and Sarah, his wife, Isaac, Abraham's son, and Rebekah, his wife, and Jacob and Leah, their son. So these were the 3 forefathers and 3 of the 4 foremothers, because Rachel, of course, is buried in Bethlehem, as it's written in the book of Genesis. These are our forefathers, and this is our land, and this is where we belong.
So it's very significant to actually be here in Hebron even today.
Absolutely, no question about it. Tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of Jews visit Hebron throughout the year on holidays and on Israel Independence Day, and we have come home.
Now, it was sort of a rumor that started the Arab revolt in the first place.
Supposedly.
Do you see the same type of thing happening today?
I'll bet you're seeing it better than I am. Living amongst Arabs, you see that sometimes people say things that you say, where did you get that from? And on the one hand, social media today gives you, and internet gives you more access to truth. On the other hand, access to social media gives you much more access to lies. And what really I hope is that we will be able to just sit down without fear of being killed and start to make friends over here. And I call me an optimist, but I pray that is what is going to happen, that the Jews and the Arabs, we are all children of Abraham, and I hope that we'll be able to live in peace together.
Has there been special commemoration ceremonies that have been taking place here?
As a matter of fact, about 15 years ago, Israel passed a law to make an official national commemoration of the massacres of 1929. And so every 10 years there's a special event. And just now, last week as a matter of fact, were 2 special events like that. The Prime Minister of Israel came and gave a speech here by the Tomb of the Patriarchs. And the Speaker of the Knesset, Mr. Yuli Edelstein, he also came. And as a matter of fact, also the President of Israel also came to Hebron for these events. There were thousands of people who were in attendance.
So that would be quite a moving experience for them to come here and just remember what happened here.
Of course. And there was one gentleman who was 98 years old. He was 8 years old during the massacre in 1929. And he was going to speak at this event. Unfortunately, he was ill, but his nephew came and talked about it. It was very, very moving.
Wow, he's still alive and he remembers the event.
Yes, he still remembers.
Now, you live here in this area.
Yes.
What's it like for you living here?
I moved here about 7 years ago from Ma'ale Adumim, which is a Jewish city just east of Jerusalem. Now I live about 30-40 minutes south of Jerusalem. The community that I live in has about 400 residents. Over 200 of them are children. And it's just a beautiful place to live. And we, on the one hand, feel so lovely living out here in the suburbs. On the other hand, we recognize that we are here in the land of Israel, bringing back the Jewish people to the land of Israel. This is the story of the Jewish people as it is prophesied in the Bible. So we really feel that we're part of these prophecies.
God said you would come back to that?
That's what he said. And when God says something, he means it.
What's your prayer for Hebron?
Like I've said before, I pray that Hebron, the word Hebron itself, comes from the word chaver, which means friend. And the Arabic word for Hebron is El Khalil, the friend. So I hope that both Arabs and Jews will be able to recognize the prophecy of this city, that it should be the city that brings people together, that is mechaber, that brings friends together. And I hope that I will be able to make more and more Muslim and Arab friends here in Hebron, and we will be able to bring hundreds and thousands and hundreds of millions of people from around the world, because Hebron is where it all began.
Okay, Gidon, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
If you'd like to know more about our show, you can join us on Facebook. Just look for Focus on Israel-Radio. Ezekiel 37 verse 4-6 says this, "Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God of these bones, surely I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. I will put sinners on you, and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am the Lord, and the Jews will receive the real shalom peace.